When I read this, I started to question humanity a little bit. The fact that it is named the STEM in a series literally makes me want to throw myself off a cliff. I would pay someone to erase it from my memory so that I could unread it. Atrocious. Atrocious is what I would call that book. Hello everyone, welcome. So today I'm finally filming a video that I have been wanting to make for a long time now. This was a really popular trend last year, so I'm definitely a bit behind when it comes to making this video, but I felt like I hadn't read enough books for it until recently. And now that I feel like I've read a decent number of the books I needed to read, I'm finally filming my ultimate tier ranking of the popular Booktok books I have read. I love tier ranking videos. I love tier ranking books. I made a few of them last year or the year before, and it's been fun and I've been wanting to make some more. So this is going to be the first one that I make. I'm very excited to get into it. I might be missing a couple here and there, but I think I have a total of 44 books on this list, which is like a decent number. Like I said, I was waiting to read some more, and there's actually a lot more that are really popular in Booktok that I still haven't read, but I would just be putting this off forever if I did that. So I just decided to make it and include the books I've read up until this point. I do quickly want to preface this video by just saying I have a lot of dissenting opinions on some of these books, so I might end up ranting about some of these. And if listening to someone complain about a book that you really love is not something that brings you joy and something that makes you feel good, you don't have to watch this video. If it's gonna make you all angry in my comments, go off, get me the engagement, that's fine, but also you don't have to watch the video. People always tell me not to give these disclaimers. I sometimes do and I sometimes don't, but I know that this one is probably gonna be a touchy one for some people, so that's why I'm stating it here now. But anyway, that out of the way, let's get into my different tiers. So as you can see here, I made my own tiers. I have 9 tiers because yes, I'm extremely extra, and no, I couldn't narrow it down. Also, I named each tier based on a different TikTok sound. Since this is Booktok books, I thought that that was appropriate and it would be more fun, so that's what I did. My top tier, the God tier, is
I think you might have accidentally saved my life.
That's a sound from Euphoria, I think. Then we have
Smart girl. I think you dropped something. My job.
And then it has that little like do-do-do-do-do sound, if you know what I'm talking about. I'm just gonna have to insert the sounds in this. Those are probably more like 4-star books that are like almost 5 stars, and maybe some of them are technically 5 stars. They're just not my favorite book I've ever read. And then the third tier that we have is
cell phones on silent and shut your fucking mouth. The show is about to begin.
I love that sound. So these are books that I really loved as well. They're probably on the higher end of 3 stars to 4 stars. These were books I thought were really good, but are not my favorite books I've ever read. Then we have
I don't know what's going on, and I simply don't want to know.
I love that sound too. These are kind of like mid-tier books that I probably rated about 3 stars, 3.5 stars. Books that were like, okay, I probably won't really think about them again or read them again, and I might recommend them, might not. They're just, you know, mid. Not the best, but not terrible. Then we have
Funny, yes, but not funny, haha. Funny, weird.
These are books that I didn't love, books that I do think have probably a couple of like iffy aspects to them here and there. Definitely has some pros, but the cons outweigh the pros for me, and it's just not my favorite. Kind of mid books, but mid books I wouldn't like really recommend to anybody. Next we have
me personally, I wouldn't take this level of disrespect.
These are books that like, I feel like this speaks for itself. I wouldn't take that level of disrespect. I would not put myself through it again. I wouldn't put someone through it. I don't think that it's worth your time. It's just, it's not a good book. It's not a good book. Then we have
Welcome to Barnes and No!
This one just felt completely appropriate since it's obviously a book-related sound anyway. So yeah, as the sound says, this is just no. Like, if you're going to Barnes & Noble, my recommendation, don't buy it. Don't even go near it. It's not worth your time. It's not good. Not the bottom tier of books, like not the worst thing I've ever read, but no. Like, just no. No. Then we have
It is so bad, I want to give you a 0, but that's not possible. So I give you a 1.
That one's self-explanatory. Obviously, these are just the worst. Like the worst. Absolutely not. 0 out of 10. Would never recommend. Don't read it. Don't want it. I probably wouldn't read something by this author again. And then lastly, we have
Why would you write this? Why would you write this book?
Which is obviously a reference to my own crying TikTok. And I think we all know what book will go in that tier. I might actually put a couple more books in that tier, but that one I made specifically for a specific book on this list. Anyway, that's it for my tier list. Those are the 9 tiers. Again, there are probably too many of them. However, I think that this is more fun when there are more tiers. And then here we have all of the books as well. So yeah, let's just get into ranking all of these. All right, so first up we have the The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. As you know, that's one of my favorite books of all time. To be honest with you, it's been so long since I've read it that I'm like not remembering some things, and I've read so many more books since I read this that I love, I think, probably more than it, which I know sounds scandalous, but the more I've been thinking about it, I feel like the less and less I'm as utterly obsessed and in love with it as I am with some other books. So I think I'm actually gonna put this in the second tier, the Snap Girl, I Think You Dropped Something tier, because that just feels wrong tier. That just feels right. That's what we're gonna do. I feel like that's a fair placement for it, for how I feel about it now. It is still one of my favorite books. It's just, I feel like I have now found books that I love even more than it. And I do have a new favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book. Not really new, but we'll get into it later in the video. Next up, we have All About Love by Bell Hooks. I read it in the That Girl Books video. This one is really popular in the like nonfiction section of Booktok and the literary fiction section of Booktok, even though it's not literary fiction. I would probably put this, it wasn't my favorite thing because I've read other Bell Hooks that I like more. So I think I'm gonna put this in Cell Phones on Silent because yeah, it's a great book. I would definitely recommend it. It's just not my favorite Bell Hooks I've read. All right, next up we have One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This one I read in my 5 romance books video, the first one. I didn't love this. I thought it was just okay. So I think I'm gonna put this in I don't know what's going on and I simply don't want to know because I wouldn't read it again. As far as romance goes, I didn't really love this, and even compared to Casey McQuiston's other book, I just thought it wasn't as funny or entertaining. So yeah, that's why it's gonna go in that tier. Just wasn't the best in my opinion. All right, now we have a literary book talk favorite, My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. I didn't love this. I also read this for the That Girl video. I thought it was okay. I feel like people act like this book is a lot more meaningful and has a lot more depth than it actually does. And personally, that's just how I felt. I thought it was very mid. So I think I'm gonna put this in I don't know what's going on and I simply don't want to know, because again, like, I wouldn't read this again. I feel like there are definitely people who I could recommend it to based on like their reading taste and stuff, because I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it's very good either. Okay, next up we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. As somebody who is a very big V.E. Schwab fan, or was a very big V.E. Schwab fan, I read like the majority of her backlist. Ever since this book came out, I don't know what has happened to me, but I just like don't like her writing the way I used to. I don't know why. I don't know what it is, but I feel like I just can't resonate with anything that she's written post like Vengeful for some reason. They just don't hit the same. I don't know what it is. I liked The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, don't get me wrong, but I didn't love it. And like when I first read it, I was like, oh, that was really good, because there were parts of it that I really, really did like. But the more time that has passed since I first read it, the less and less I think about it, and the less and less I care about this book, which I feel really bad saying, because as someone who's like loved V.E. Schwab, I mean, like, I have so many of her books. Is that the shelf? I think so. Yeah, right here. I have so many of her books. I've read, I think, every single one of these except for 1 or 2. And also, I just like can't get myself to read any of her new stuff. And I don't know why that is, but that's just how I felt since I read this book. But yeah, anyway, I would put The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue in probably I don't know what's going on and I don't want to know. I'd probably put it, I'm gonna move it first because I like it better than these other 2 books for sure. Okay, can we? Thank you. It's not show-stopping, it's not amazing, it's just okay overall, in my opinion. She has much better books. Next up, we have Alone with You in the Ether. I just read this recently. I just talked about it in my last video, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to everyone who is so in love with this book. I didn't love it. I thought that honestly, it should go in the funny, yes, but not funny, haha, funny, weird category. It's not even close to one of the worst books I've ever read. Like, obviously, it's not that bad in my opinion, and I personally wouldn't really recommend it, but like I can see the appeal. I see what people like about it, but as a whole, I think this book is very, very convoluted and very pretentious. I talked about it a lot in my last video, like I said. My main criticism of this is that it is trying way too hard to be different, and it is trying to do way too much all at one time. The book uses a ton of different formatting styles throughout it. Like at one point there's narration and like a narrator and stage directions, kind of like it's a play. At other times it switches into just classic dialogue. At other times it switches into like indirect dialogue, indirect speech. It's very, very strange. It's very convoluted, and the book was trying really hard to be not like other books. Like that was, I felt like, in my opinion, the biggest thing. It was really, really pretentious, which I said in that video as well. Makes sense for the story. I don't think that that was unintentional. However, it reads as really pretentious and not in an enjoyable way, in my opinion. The writing's really heavy, it's really dense, and it's just trying way too hard. And for me, it didn't work at all. It's not the best. Definitely not something I would ever read again, personally. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Alone with You in the Ether. If you want to hear more in-depth, detailed thoughts on it, you can go watch that video because I talked about it for like 15 minutes. All right, next up we have You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao. This book, in my opinion, was just deeply, deeply okay. This is going in, I don't know what's going on, and I simply don't want to know. It was just fine. Like, it wasn't super hard-hitting to me. It wasn't extremely emotional the way a lot of people had described it to be. At least for me, it didn't delve as much into the whole theme of grief as much as I was expecting it to. It just felt like something was missing. So yeah, that's why it's going in that tier for me. Okay, next up we have The Spanish Love Deception, the classic. Everyone knows what tier this is going in. This is going in, it is so bad, I want to give you a 0, because that's the sound I used when I made a TikTok about it, and that is exactly what inspired this tier to begin with. I will never, ever in my life get over the I want to feel you milking me line. It's so funny to me. I'm gonna laugh about it for the rest of my life. Like, if this book did anything for me, it has made me laugh, and it's all thanks to that line. So you know what, like, that's where maybe where the 1 single star comes from, the fact that I can laugh at it. But yeah, no, absolutely would never recommend. We all know my thoughts on The Spanish Love Deception. If you don't, you can go watch the romance books video. And having read so much romance now since I read this book, I feel like I like it even less than I did before, if that was even possible. Okay, next up we have Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reed. This is another book that I read fairly recently, and I mentioned this in my most recent video as well. I talked about it a bit. I honestly don't know what to do with this because I loved this so much and I keep thinking about it, and with like each passing day, I feel like I like it more than I liked it before. So right now, I'm kind of tempted to put it in the second tier, like the Snap Girl tier, because I don't necessarily want to say that it is one of my all-time favorite books yet, because I don't know that it's on that level for sure, but it's up there. So for now, I think I'm going to put it in the second tier next to Evelyn Hugo, because that just feels right for now. However, this book could easily become one of my favorite books I've ever read. I feel like I'd have to read it again for that to happen. I love it. I love it so much, and I think everyone should read it. Not necessarily everyone, because it's really disturbing, it's really graphic and dark, and really hard to read at times, because it's gothic horror. Like I said, I'm going to be thinking about it for a really long time. Her writing is so beautiful, and yeah, if you like gothic horror, if you like gothic romance, this is less gothic romance, more gothic horror and gothic retelling, then I think you definitely enjoy this one. This is a book I'm really glad that I saw on Booktok and decided to pick up, because oh my god, one of the best things I've read this year. Okay, next up we have Slammed by Colleen Hoover. And before anyone gets mad at me and is like, Slammed is not a popular Booktok book, I'm aware that it's all of Colleen Hoover's like other books, the majority of her other books, but like I haven't read any other Colleen Hoover book, and I can't make this video without a Colleen Hoover book on this list, so I'm putting the one that I have read, which is Slammed. And this is going in Why Would You Write This Book? I would put it in the tier above, but like honestly, why would you write this book? Why would you write it? I know that I can't technically judge all of Colleen Hoover's books based on this just one book, which a lot of people will argue and say is probably one of her worst books. However, like I said, because I haven't read any of her other books and I need a Colleen Hoover book on this list, I am including this one because people just talk about Colleen Hoover like as an author anyway. And she did write this. I will not let you guys forget that. She did write this book. She did write this Ezria 2.0 teacher-student relationship book that everyone likes to excuse as not a teacher-student relationship and not completely inappropriate and an abuse of power, even though it is, and it's very bad, and just one of the worst things I've ever read in my life. Anyway, so that's where that's going. All right, and then next up we have Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. I loved this. This is one of the books that got me super into Japanese like translated fiction, because this one is just phenomenal. I think I would probably put this in, I don't know if I want to put it in the second or third tier. I'm gonna put it in the third tier, but I'm gonna put it before All About Love, because it could be close to the books in the second tier as well, but like it's not necessarily as comparable to Evelyn Hugo and Juniper and Thorn in my head. It's still definitely one of my favorite books I've read this year, and the story just completely like stuck with me. It was funny and clever and witty, and it was just an overall really enjoyable reading experience. Okay, next up we have Heartstopper, and I'm trying to be more selective with what I call like my all-time favorite books. So I am actually going to put Heartstopper in the second tier, because yes, in some ways, honestly, the first tier does fit Heartstopper a lot because there are some things about that story that really just touched me so much that I feel so deeply connected to and definitely can make it one of my all-time favorite books. However, like I said, I'm trying to be a lot more selective and a lot more exclusive with what I call my favorite favorites. Like if I were to give you a top 10 list of my favorite books, I want those books to be the books, you know? And I feel like I wouldn't necessarily put Heartstopper on that list despite the fact that it's a 5-star book. I love it like to death. All of these books in the second tier are still 5-star books. They're just not like my favorite ones. So yeah, that's why I'm gonna put it with those for now. I don't know, I might change these around later. I get really indecisive doing these videos. It's really hard. Okay, next up we have Delilah Green Doesn't Care. This is another book I read for my second romance books video. This one I liked more than One Last Stop, but I think I'd still put it in the same tier, but I think I'd put it above them. Like I'm gonna put this probably here because I didn't like it as much as The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, but I liked it more than One Last Stop and My Year of Rest and Relaxation and You've Reached Sam. It was just okay overall, and I don't really think about it very much. I would definitely recommend it if you want a sapphic romance book, but at the same time, it was just all right. So yeah, that's where I'd put this one. Okay, next up we have People We Meet on Vacation. I think that I am going to put this in... Oh, this is hard. Okay, because I kind of want to put it in Cell Phones on Silent because there's some things about it that I really, really liked, but as a whole, like I think it was mostly just all right. Actually, okay, I think I'm gonna put it in I Don't Know What's Going On and I Simply Don't Want to Know, but it's gonna go first because I liked it the most out of all of those books for sure. Or maybe I liked it equally to as much as how much I liked The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It's just another book that's like okay overall. There are definitely aspects of it that I really, really loved, but as a whole, it's just fine. Oh my god, okay. Now we have From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Everyone knows where this is going. Everyone, like, that's not surprising. It's gonna go first in this tier because I don't think I have ever read a book that I hated as much as this. I don't think I've ever read a book that was more poorly written. It is one of the worst things I've ever read in my entire life. I would pay someone to erase it from my memory so that I could unread it, you know? Like, oh my god, atrocious. Atrocious is what I would call that book. I read this and slammed in my I read 5 books I said I'd never read video if you want to hear me talk about it in a lot more detail with some spoilers and everything. When I read this, I started to question humanity a little bit. This was one of those times where I was like, I think I can never take a like mainstream popular book talk recommendation again because my god, what is this? And I don't want this to come across as like me being like, oh, book talk recommends terrible books and blah blah blah, because I know that's like an attitude a lot of people have, and like I've definitely said things in that vein before myself. Because yes, in terms of mainstream book talk, like the main books that get popular on that platform that completely blow up, the majority of them are, we'll say, not to my taste. However, if you look at the platform as a whole and you look at the whole book talk community, there are so many book talkers who are recommending so many amazing books that I never would have heard of if I hadn't been on there and seen somebody mention it once or twice. So yeah, it's not like the whole of book talk only recommends these same like 10 books and they're all really bad, because there are plenty of people who are recommending really great books. It's just the stuff that like completely blows up that I have found to be some of the most poorly written literature I've ever read in my entire life. And From Blood and Ash at this moment in time sits at #1 on that list. Okay, next up we have Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. This is another book I read for that same video. This one I definitely think is less popular on TikTok now, but I still see it on a lot of people's like book talk lists. So I think it was more popular a couple years ago. And this one, I think I'm gonna put it in, me personally, I would never take this level of disrespect because it wasn't good. Like this book was not good, but it's also not the worst thing I've ever read. I can see the appeal, especially in terms of like 2015 YA dystopian, when that genre was really, really big. I can see why this kind of took off at that time. But now comparing it to a lot of the YA genre, like this book does not hold up. It's not even close to as good as what exists in the genre right now, or even what existed back then if we're being honest. But like, it's still not the worst thing I've ever read. Like, it's just It's really okay, but on the bad side of okay, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it's going in that tier. Next up we have Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is another book I read for my second romance video. I really loved this. So I think I'm gonna put this in the cell phones on silent tier because this book was great. Like, it was really, really great. And it's definitely one of my favorite romance books I've read. It was almost 5 stars to me, but there was just something in it that was missing that didn't push it over the edge to make it a 5-star book to me. But I definitely really enjoyed it. It was very like comforting to read. It's very emotional. It has just a lot more than the romance as well. The relationship dynamic that the sisters have with one another was really beautiful, and I love what was explored there. Overall, yeah, just an excellent book. It's worth the hype in my opinion. Okay, next up we have Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is another Japanese translated fiction book. I loved this. This is going in, what's it called? I forget the name of all of my tiers. The, I think you dropped something, my jaw tier, because I feel like it's comparable to a lot of the books I have in there. I think I rated this 5 stars. Honestly, I think it's probably closer to 4.5, but it's fantastic. It is so cozy. It's so heartwarming. It's a perfect like fall book, I think. It kind of feels like a collection of short stories that are all connected to one another, but it's so, so beautiful, and I would absolutely recommend. Okay, next up we have Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. I should have ordered these. I did not order them, so we're just gonna go in this random order, but whatever. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna put all of Sally Rooney's books together right now so we can just rank them in the order that I read them. So we'll start with Normal People. I read this for my I read 5 sad books video that I posted this year, even though I read it last year. As you know, if you've watched the video, I don't love this book. I don't really like this book, actually. I think I'd probably put this in funny yes, but not funny haha, funny weird. I don't think that it's necessarily as bad as some of the stuff that I would put in the lower tiers. It's just way overhyped in my opinion. I think that's one of the biggest things about it. And overall, it's again not as deep and emotional as people say it is to me. It's fine if you get that much out of it. That's amazing. I don't. I don't see what other people see in it. I just felt like it was another book kind of like Alone with You in the Ether that was just trying a little too hard, and because I could feel it trying, it kind of just missed the mark to me. However, Conversations with Friends I would put in the Shut Your Mouth, The Show's About to Begin tier, because this book was great. This book to me is everything that Normal People tried to do, except it does it better, and I loved it. So yeah, that would absolutely go in that tier. I really, really liked Conversations with Friends, and out of all of her books, that is the one and only one I would recommend personally. And then we have Beautiful World, Where Are You? This one I'm gonna put in, me personally, I would never take this level of disrespect. It's not good. Actually, no, you know what? I'm gonna put it in Welcome to Barnes & No. I would never recommend this at all. Like, I could recommend Red Queen to a person, probably. I would not recommend Beautiful World, Where Are You? That book was so bad, in my opinion. It was so dull and it was so boring. And it was literally the author just using her book to respond to the criticisms that she gets. And it was just such a significant part of the book that it didn't feel like a book. It felt like she was writing like an article. And it was really ironic because I feel like a main criticism she gets is how she uses her books and her characters to kind of just like preach her ideologies and her messages at you, which honestly, I don't even disagree with a lot of her ideologies or the messaging that she has in her books. It's just the way that she does it is so like obvious and in your face that there's like no nuance and no room for the reader to interpret anything. A lot of the time, not always. Conversations with Friends does a really good job of having nuance in my opinion. And then in Beautiful World, Where Are You? She's like addressing some of that criticism through her characters. In doing that, she actually just makes it worse, because then she's even more directly trying to like tell her readers what she's thinking and what she is saying, which was really strange. Like, I just don't know why you would have that approach to it. Yeah, it was very weird. I also didn't care about any of the characters. It was literally more of the same of Normal People and Conversations with Friends, except not as well written as either of those two. So yeah, definitely by far my least favorite one. I honestly don't think I'll read another Sally Rooney book. She's just not for me. Okay, next up we have The Selection by Kira Cass. This is gonna go in Welcome to Barnes & No. Not the worst thing I've ever read. However, it's up there. I read this in my I read 5 books I said I'd never read video. When I talked about it, a lot of people were like, well, you have to acknowledge that like this book was written for like a younger audience. Do you know how many great books were written for younger audiences that are not nearly as terrible or as insulting as this one is to the reader? Like, this book assumes the reader is dumb. And you can compare this to something like Percy Jackson, which is a middle grade book, or another YA series like The Hunger Games, which is also written for a younger audience. Neither of those books assume that their audience is incapable incapable of analyzing anything or incapable of understanding what the message of the book is without them explicitly telling it to you. Just because the book is meant for a younger audience does not mean that the book needs to be dumbed down. That insinuates that the younger audience is not smart enough to be able to pick up on anything, which I just don't think is true. And again, if you compare it to other books within the same category that are made for the same age range, a lot of those great books don't do that. And those books are so much better for that reason, among many other reasons, but that's one reason. But the selection is incredibly boring. I will never get over America Singer's name and the fact that she is a singer. That's one of the worst things I've ever heard in my entire life. The romance is terrible and toxic. The men were all toxic. I don't understand. I personally do not understand. I get it if you read it when you were like really young and it was like your favorite like trash series. That's fun. That's fine. Everyone has their favorite trash series. I absolutely had mine. I just don't get why this is having a resurgence now, because there's so much better YA dystopian fantasy, anything, just anything. Anything is better. Almost anything, except for the books in the tiers below. All right, next up we have My Dark Vanessa. I loved this book, which is a really weird thing to say because it is one of the most disturbing, one of the worst things I've ever read. My Dark Vanessa, in my opinion, does everything right when it comes to writing a book about trauma and traumatic experiences and depicting that trauma as well. It does everything in a way that is respectful and in a way that is not harmful to the reader. I'm not saying that you won't have a hard time reading this or that it can't be triggering. It definitely can be, and it will be. However, it is so well written, and I think it handles everything so well and so gracefully. And I loved it. This is gonna go in Snap Girl, I Think You Dropped Something, My Jaw, because it's one of the best books I've ever read. Like, it honestly is one of the best books I've ever read. I think about it constantly. Definitely look up content warnings if you decide to read it. It is not easy to read. I would not recommend it to everyone. However, I absolutely loved it. Okay, next up we have They Both Die at the End. If you watched my sad books video, you know I didn't like this. I'm gonna put this in, me personally, I wouldn't take this level of disrespect. It's not good. I wouldn't put myself through that again. Everyone acts like this book is so devastating. It's not. Now it's getting a sequel. I don't know why we need a sequel or a prequel. I have no idea. It's really underwhelming. The characters lack a lot of depth and they're not well fleshed out, and I didn't have a good time reading it. I'm sorry if you loved it. Personally, I didn't. Now we get into Throne of Glass. I read this so long ago. For this, I'm gonna base it off of my opinion on the series and not just the first book, because I've read all but the last two books. So I've read like 5 or 6 of these books, like a lot of them. I'm gonna put this in Welcome to Barnes and No, because no, I don't like the Throne of Glass series. We all know this. This is not news to anybody. I really did enjoy the first 2 books when I first read them, and then everything from there went downhill, and it was not a good time. You all know my thoughts on Throne of Glass and Sarah J. Maas, so that goes there. Okay, then we have The Love Hypothesis. I am gonna put this in, me personally, I wouldn't take this level of disrespect because some of the lines in there were so cringy that I don't think you should put yourself through that. It was disrespectful having to read some of those. That book is just straight up Raylo fan fiction, and if you don't like Raylo, I don't really think you're really gonna love this book very much. You could, but there's much better romance out there, and from what I've heard about her STEMinist series, which is what I've heard it's called, which is honestly worse than the book itself, like the fact that it is named the STEMinist series literally makes me want to throw myself off a cliff, but that's a story for another day. But from what I've heard, everyone says that every single book she has written is exactly the same thing. So that's fun. We love range. I think it's deeply mediocre, and people hype it up way too much. There's so much better romance, like much better romance. Okay, next up we have Shadow and Bone. I love the Shadow and Bone series. I reread it last year and read the 3rd one for the first time, and I fell in love. I did not love it this much the first time I read it, and then this second time around fell completely in love. I'm gonna put this on in the cell phones on silent, shut your mouths tier, because it's not like my favorite series, but it's definitely up there. It's going there. I'm so excited for season 2 of the show. Next up, we have The Cruel Prince, which I read a really long time ago, and I just thought this book was okay. I think I'm gonna put this in, yes, but not, no, I'm gonna put it up here actually. I don't know what's going on and I simply don't want to know. Like, it's just fine. This book was not amazing to me. It was okay, and I really don't remember anything about it, if I'm being honest. But I know I didn't like it enough to keep reading the next books in the series. Okay, now we have ACOTAR. The only reason I had a good time reading this was because I was trying to find all of the Howl's Moving Castle comparisons. But objectively, I think that it's like equivalent to like the books in the Welcome to Barnes and No category for me. Even though in the video that I read it in, I also read The Red Queen and I said that I liked it probably more than that one, or equivalently so. Because based on what I know about the rest of the ACOTAR series, which you can say that's not fair because you haven't read them, I know more than enough information about the rest of them. And my opinions on just like Sarah J Maas's writing as a whole, I like that less than I like The Red Queen. So yeah, it's gonna go to Welcome to Barnes and No. The only fun thing about this was finding the House Moving Castle comparisons. All right, now we have We Were Liars. Listen, I remember nothing about this book. I read it years ago, but I just remember thinking it was like so fine, like nothing happened and it was boring. So I'm probably gonna put this in funny haha, but not funny haha, funny weird. I wouldn't recommend it. It wasn't terrible, but like it wasn't jaw-dropping the way everyone acts like it is, and again, the plot twist is pretty predictable in my opinion. Okay, then we have The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid, same author as Juniper and Thorn. I really liked this book. I'm gonna put it in Cell Phones on Silent because it was really great. It's just like not my favorite book. If you like romance fantasy with like Jewish and Hungarian mythology mixed into there, it was really great. Next up we have Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm gonna put this in I don't know what's going on and I simply don't want to know. I liked this book. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked some aspects of it, but honestly, as time has gone on, I think about it less and less. It's definitely not my favorite of her books at all. I think it was just not as memorable as Daisy Jones and Evelyn Hugo, so it's gonna go in that category. Okay, next up we have Percy Jackson. It's been so long since I've read Percy Jackson, but the series is definitely in Cell Phones on Silent because it's just one of the greatest fantasy series of all time, and I'm so excited for the show. I absolutely have to reread the books. I might do a reading vlog of it if you guys are interested, but yes, I'm very, very excited for that show, and I love the Percy Jackson series. I can't believe I have nothing in the top tier so far. I know there are books on here that are in the top tier, but this is pretty like widely spread out, which is impressive. I wasn't expecting that. Okay, next up we have 7 Days in June, which is another one I read for my second romance video. This one is gonna go in Cell Phones on Silent. This book was so good. I like this one pretty much equivalently to how I liked Book Lovers, like 4.5 stars. If you want a romance book that is definitely more serious in tone and heavier at times because it deals with like addiction and like substance abuse and stuff like that, and trauma, depression, just look up content warnings if you want to read it. Some stuff is pretty heavy, but overall it is so good. It's really witty. Some of the writing's really funny and it's so romantic. So highly recommend. That one was definitely worth reading. Okay, next up we have Daisy Jones and the Six. This one is the first one I'm going to put in the I think you might have accidentally saved my life category. This is what I was talking about earlier. I think I've finally decided Daisy Jones and the Six is my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I like it more than I like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I love this book so much. I still think about it a lot. I think I have more of a memory of this one than I do of Evelyn Hugo. I've read it so many times at this point. In my opinion, it is her best book, and I'm so excited for the show. So excited for the show. And now talking about it, I just want to read it again. Okay, next up we have Six of Crows. Somehow all of my God tier books are like right next to each other, but Six of Crows, I'm counting it as the whole series, goes in my top tier because nothing compares to this series. Every time I think about anything else, it's not Six of Crows, you know? It's not Crooked Kingdom. It's not Kaz, Inez, Jesper, Wylan, Nina, Matthias. Like, nobody is them. Nobody is them, and no one ever will be. I'm glad this book blew up on TikTok. It deserves it. It's just one of the greatest YA fantasy, just fantasy ever. Ever, ever, ever. I love it so much. Okay, and then next up we have, obviously, my #1 book ever of all time. We're going in the first spot, The Night Circus, because I love it so much. I actually don't see it that much on TikTok, but it was on a lot of people's TikTok lists, so I included it in here. Because if you know me, you know that's like my favorite book of all time. I have to read it again because, again, I still can't 100% say that, but nothing is The Night Circus. Like, nothing makes me feel the way The Night Circus makes me feel. Even if I've read objectively better books, nothing makes me feel like that book makes me feel. It is incomparable. I don't know that I'll ever be able to feel that same magic again. Okay, next up we have The Idiot by Eilif Batuman. I didn't like this. However, I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's for me, is the thing. So I'm actually going to put this in I don't know what's going on and I simply don't want to know. Even though I rated this book like 2 stars, I still objectively think it is better than some of the books that I have below it. So that's why I don't want to put it any lower, but I don't personally like it, but I can understand why someone would. And also I don't know what's going on and I simply don't want to know, was my brain the entire time reading the book. I had no idea what was going on and I didn't want to know. I didn't care. I was so bored. I get what the book is trying to do. It's not for me. So I was never going to like it very much. Next up we have The Atlas 6, which I have not talked about. I've mentioned that I've read it, but I haven't actually talked about it because I was going to include it in a video and then that didn't work out. The Atlas 6, I'm going to put in, I feel like it's in between Cell Phones on Silent and I don't know what's going on and I simply don't want to know. But I'm going to put it at the end of Cell Phones on Silent because I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun, but it definitely has some aspects that I think need a lot of work. But I think reading the second book, like the sequel, The Atlas Paradox, will definitely determine for me whether or not this is like a favorite or if it's just more of like a mid-tier series. But for now, I'm gonna put it there because I did really enjoy it. I had a good time reading this. I thought it was a lot of fun and I'm very curious about the world. Despite the fact that it definitely needs help with the world building, her characterization is amazing. That was definitely the most enjoyable part of that book for me. So I did like it. Okay, next up we have A Little Life. I'm not gonna say anything. You don't need to know anything else other than this goes in this category. We all know, you all saw me sob my eyes out to this and saw me have my life ruined. So, but yes, in my opinion, this book does everything wrong when it comes to dealing with traumatic, disturbing subjects. It just exploits those things and I hate it. I don't want to talk about it. Okay, next up we have Circe. Circe is going to go in the, no, not there, the Snap Girl tier because it could be a favorite book and it probably kind of is up there, but I'd have to read it again. But it is still one of my favorite books ever, in my opinion, better than The Song of Achilles, which we'll do next actually. Song of Achilles I'm gonna put in Cell Phones on Silent because it was good. I could actually probably put it even lower, but I don't think it's fair to compare it to the other ones lower. I liked it more than that. It's just not as good as Circe in my opinion. I think it's a little bit overhyped for what it is. Maybe had I read it like 10 years ago when it first came out, I would feel differently, but with the way people talk about it, I feel like there are just better, more emotional books in general, but it's still a great book overall. All right, and then next we have Red, White, and Royal Blue. The more time that passes, the less I think about this book, but I think I'm gonna put it in Cell Phones on Silent because I really loved my experience of reading this book and I had such a fun time with it because it was my first experience reading a true romance book and I was not expecting to like it at all, but I surprisingly really did. Despite the neoliberal politics in it, the romance is actually very enjoyable, and if we ignore that aspect of it, then it's really fun because the characters have so much chemistry and it's really witty and funny. So yeah, I just had a fun time with that one, so it's gonna go there. All right, and then lastly we have Shatter Me, which I read a million years ago. But I'm gonna put this in, me personally, I would not take that level of disrespect because this is not even close to as good as people say that it is. I've read the whole series, well, the first three. The first three were the only ones that were out when I was reading it. I would never call this YA dystopian. Like, you can't even call this dystopian. There's like no dystopian elements to this. This is basically a romance series, and the romance is also incredibly boring in my opinion. But again, it's been so long since I've read it, I really don't remember a lot. But yeah, overall, not my favorite. But yeah, there we have it. This is my tier list ranking all of the popular TikTok books, Booktok books. I'm actually kind of surprised by how many are in the like top tiers. I think it's because I don't read like a lot of the ones that I know I won't like. I've read plenty of Booktok books that I really love, like I said, plenty that I would not wish upon my worst enemy. But you can clearly see like the range of recommendations that you can get from the Booktok community. Because like I said, it's not just all those like same 5-10 books that you'll see everywhere. If you really look for the other sides of the community, if you look for specific recommendations, you're bound to find something you really like. But there you all have it. That is it for this video. I had a really good time making this. It was a lot of fun. If there are any other tier ranking videos that you would like to see, please do let me know and I will be sure to make them. If you would like to follow me on any of my social media, all of my links are in the description box as always. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and I will see you in my next video. Bye!